meeting instance, and it's also, as a result, preventing me from deleting it. But there's nothing stopping you from creating another room inside that area and just not turning on room 1.
Okay.
Okay. And in the meantime, I'm going to copy that URL and see if we can't figure out how to delete it and see if there's something that we can do to fix that.
Cool.
All right. Heather, back to you.
Yes. So Irina said, I have created several forms on my dashboard. This is for the Enlightened Entrepreneur Live, but the buttons are very huge. I cannot change them. When I click on the button for formatting, it disappears on my dashboard. What might I be missing?
Possibly nothing. What's the organization? Serena here? No.
I thought I saw her.
She just left. She texted me that she had an emergency, so she asked me to listen for the answer.
Okay.
It's Radiant Mastery, LLC.
That just has a demo event in it. I don't think that's right.
There's 2 of them.
Ugh.
Named exactly the same.
Yeah. Oh yeah, look at that.
You should have known that, Blue.
Mm-hmm.
Look for other exactly the same named ones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which event is it? Do you know? Did she say?
Yeah, it's the Enlightened Entrepreneur Live.
Okay. Oh wow, those are big buttons. Okay, so let me actually unfix them. So the issue is we have a an old config structure with forms that still hasn't been updated. So if you look here, that what Irina's talking about is this massive button that says apply or vote. And when she clicks on this button to try and modify it, it's showing her this. It's not actually letting her see the, I assume this is what she meant. So if she goes into edit post form styles, you'll take a look. If you take a look, you'll see that the submit button font size is 45. And that's what's causing these buttons to be huge. So I'm going to change that from 45 to 25. And then I'm going to click save. And that changes that. The other thing you may want to do is inside of, oh, it's not here. Where is it? Edit post form styles, post form styles, form width, form position.
It's the 100% form button
Yeah,
size.
there it is. Thank you. So form button size, rather than be 100%, maybe have it be 50%. That could potentially fix it, and then take your orientation and move it to the left. That may work a little bit better, just like that. But yeah, that's where everything for this is under post form styles. And just to match your things, I'm going to add a radius to the buttons, and there you go.
Awesome. Miriam said, hello, can you explain the video recordings and how they work? We record and then we can download them and upload them to our own site for replays, correct?
Correct. Feels like you explained it just perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself, Miriam.
Can I just ask, sort of adding to that, when you have your replays back so that people aren't downloading and uploading somewhere else for everything, is there a way of protecting? What do you do for that? Like, do you have a magic link that I can, is that how you give it to people, the replays, through a magic link?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, how do you protect your recordings?
Yes.
Got it. So generally speaking, we don't consider Obvio to be what I'll call an LMS or a learning management system. Which just basically means it's not meant for content distribution, right? It's not meant to create courses and deliver courses. It was built and is intended for live events. With that being said, you can upload something to Vimeo or Wistia. Those are probably the only two that I would even consider if you were worried about privacy. Maybe Searchy. The reality is, once you get video on the internet, there's always a way to get access to it, right? Like, I could just record my screen and press play and walk away and get a recording of pretty much anything I wanted. So if somebody really wants it, they're going to get it. So generally speaking, the approach that we take is, how many hoops does somebody have to jump through to actually get it? Which will significantly reduce the number of people who can get it. With that being said, we don't generally use YouTube Unlisted, because that's probably the easiest platform to download off of, even though it's free, right? Like, YouTube Unlisted videos is super awesome, because you can upload all your content to YouTube, make it unlisted, and then embed it onto your Obvio dashboard, and then only people who have access to your Obvio dashboard or who know the link to the unlisted video can view it. But once they're on the dashboard, they can also click the YouTube logo, wind up on YouTube, get the YouTube URL, and then use an application to download the YouTube video. But again, like, there's how many people on this call right now? There's 26 people on this call, and I would venture to say to you that probably 5 of them at most can do what I just said. So should we worry too much about it? Probably not, but that's up to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so Stephanie posted a question. She wants to know where to start. Should I practice building my dashboard before an event is planned? Should she use the onboarding videos, or should she wait until she's close to hosting an event?
Okay, so that's a great question, and I'm going to answer it like this. Obvio should not prevent you from doing your live event, right? It should be a tool that you use to enhance the awesomeness of that live event. And filling the room is more important than having a pretty dashboard, right? Because, it's kind of like, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to see it, did it make a noise, right? If you have an amazing dashboard, but you don't sell any tickets to your event, does it really matter? Probably not. So I would say focus on filling your event, focus on those pieces. It's in Leap. It's part of the reason why we do tech last. Stephanie, was it Stephanie who asked that question? Yeah.
Yes.
So Stephanie, you have in Leap the ability to have us build your first dashboard for you, right? So take advantage of that. We're not going to do all the work. What we essentially do is we build the shell for you, and then you add your content to it, but it shortcuts the process. And then once you have that in place, now for your next event, you can just duplicate the last event, right? To make your life a little bit easier. So I would say, yes, I want you to be comfortable inside of Obvio, but if you just start building and you start playing, it's a simple enough application that it shouldn't take you long to get comfortable with the basics. And to me, the basics are, do you know how to get into Zoom? Right? If you don't know how to do that, the rest doesn't matter. Do you know how to get your attendees into Zoom? Great. And then the rest is eye candy. Right? It's great to be able to give them PDFs that they can download from your dashboard. It's great to have a link to the Facebook group from your dashboard. It's great to do forms and polls and have gamification turned on and all of that jazz, and Zoom backgrounds and speaker bios and FAQ pages, and all of those things are awesome. But this at its simplest, what's most important is getting people into Zoom. And then just add the other stuff as you go, as you feel comfortable with it. All right, Heather, who's the next person?
The next one is from Linda. She said, my husband has a customer that wants to come to my event and her family members. Should I send her a link that everyone can use, or get each of their emails to enter each one manually?
The second one.
Great. Then one from Robin. Can Obvio connect with any CRM? I'm looking at a GHL agency that I haven't heard mentioned before, Amplify AI. Anything about them I should ask before I sign up? I want to make sure I can utilize it with Obvio.
If they're a Go High Level agency, the Go High Level integration will work with that agency. It doesn't matter what they label themselves as. Beyond that, to fully answer the question, Obvio will work with any CRM that has the ability to work with Zapier. So pretty much most CRMs do. We have yet to encounter a CRM that we can't get connected in some way. But we also have, your I think the 7 most popular ones that our users are using are, have native integration. You don't yet need to use Zapier, which is nice. Is it 7? Maybe it's 8. Are you counting, Grant? Is that what you were doing? No, never mind.
I was counting in my head.
I was thinking about the tiles. I think it's 4 across on the page.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next question.
Jeff is unable to create a new room. It gives him an error. I posted the error message in Slack for you guys to see as well.
I'm going to say that is likely going to require a little bit deeper thing. The alternate that you can do is rename the area to do not use, create a new area, change the destination to the button. I mean, is that ideal? No, not really. But if you need to get people into your event in 15 minutes, it'll work.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was going to do, but
I
I thought I should bring it up first. What it was doing.
Okay, no worries. Well, and in the meantime, I have passed that on to the dev team to see if we can't figure out what's going on with that particular room, and hopefully solve it, not just for you, but also pull that problem out of existence for us.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah.
Heather said, I have a client that would like to add events. They are on my pro account. Can we add that?
That would like to add event.
Yeah, it's ad event Winter. The owner's name is Winter, Adevent. I talked to him and you guys have an integration. Obvio has a full integration.
Oh, you're talking about a event.
Yeah, I have it. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, ad event is also a service, so that's why you're confusing the
I
FI
apologize. A event.
Yeah.
Sorry, but when he showed it to me, it looked like it was only for the enterprise. So I have one client enterprise, but this client is on my pro. And didn't know if we do it.
So a event can still integrate with Obvio using the pro account. The difference is in order to get a event's full schmancy actions based on attendance feature working, you need to send webhooks from Obvio to a event based on Zoom attendance. Webhooks are an enterprise only feature. So it will
Okay.
work. You just won't be able to do things like if somebody didn't attend, then
Mhm.
from a event trigger an action, whether it's an email or a text message or something else from a event. So it'll work on Pro. There's
Yeah.
just some limitations that won't work. But a event can still open a Zoom meeting on
Okay.
Obvio. It can open the area. It can
Okay.
press play on the video. It can submit chats into Zoom from a event that you can time into like an evergreen style of webinar.
Yep.
All of that still works. The piece that doesn't is the attendance data that a event can leverage for post-event follow-up.
Okay, so so you said evergreen because that was a big part of the client wanted the evergreen piece.
Yep.
So that can work on the Pro. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think honestly, the main reason in my head, I mean, I think a event has some other ideas in terms of why or why you would use them. And I think there's
Yeah.
some really cool things like some of the
Yeah.
automations that they have make life a little bit easier. But for me, the killer feature of a event is the ability to upload a video to a event and say, launch Zoom, press play at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning and open the area for my attendees. And then to be hands off and not have to touch it is pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. Okay, so that part can be done with a Pro account because that's what my client wants.
Yep.
And then, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, Winter's great. He happens to live down the street from me in Austin, which I didn't know until I met him over Zoom. So it's great. But super great guy, super cool company. Thank you. That's all I need.
Welcome. Yeah, Winter's awesome.
Okay, the next one is from Mary. Am I able to delete cloud recordings? Can I rename the files in Obvio? And can I share the recordings with my clients directly from Obvio with a link?
I actually don't think you can delete cloud recordings. And can you share them with others with a link? I believe you can technically just by right clicking on the download button and saying copy link. I'm pretty sure that is, I feel like that is a clickable URL that can be used outside of Obvio if you really wanted to do that. I wouldn't do it that way. If it were me, I would download the video, trim it probably because the video probably starts earlier than you want it to, and it probably ends maybe a little later than you want it to if you started your Zoom room early and ended it late. So I would trim it up. I'd throw a logo on the front, logo on the back, and then I would upload it to Searchy or Wistia or Vimeo or YouTube or one of those sites. That's the process that I would do. I wouldn't send a direct link to a Zoom video almost ever.
Okay, her next question was, can you show me how to set up this ask a question feature on my dashboard or share the link to the recording? I can share the link if you don't want to go through it.
No, I don't mind going through it. I actually think it's a really cool feature. So, and we've made some changes to it recently. So why not do just a really quick rundown. I'm not actually going to create it in real time, but I'll show you the pieces and parts for what's on the Obvio dashboard. So, so this is the editor for the Obvio dashboard. And if I scroll down, you'll see that there's an ask a question button. Now, the button's the easiest part. All you have to do is direct the button to a form and then direct it to the form that you want to actually have pop open. Now, when buttons are directed to forms, when they are clicked, they have a little modal or a little pop-up that pops up over top of the dashboard. And you guys know what that looks like because you've submitted questions. Now, that's the button part. It's the easiest part. The part that's a tiny bit more challenging or just takes a little bit more is going into forms. So features, forms, creating a new form. You name the form, you make some decisions as to whether or not attendees can edit their answers or allow multiple submissions. You can only do one of the two. For Q&A features, especially if you're going to allow your people to submit more than one question, you want to make sure that you allow multiple submissions. If you don't want them to be able to submit more than one question, you just uncheck that. If you want them to be able to modify their answer, you can. For Q&A, generally speaking, I think best practices would be to allow multiple submissions. Then you have the submit label. That is what the button inside the modal to submit the question says. So submit my question. And then a thank you message, like once they have a submitted window or submitted message, or once they submit their question. So you see this button or this text shows up, I think, for about 10 seconds before it disappears after you submit the message. From there, we have just one question that we've added, and that question is a long answer text with the label, "What is your question?" There's nothing else that I've done inside of this. We don't have anything connected to Zapier or points or redirects or anything along those lines. You click save. So now that's how you create it. From there, there's the moderation feature so that you can actually see the questions that come in. So from the forms page, if you highlight the, or if you click on the three dots next to the form name, you'll see a new option called moderation. And when you click on that, you'll see 3 columns, one for incoming, one for approved, and one for on deck. This is where it gets a tiny bit complicated, but essentially we've created, actually Grant created, modeled, whatever. Grant created a Q&A system that we were using internally for about 6 months or so, and it's a multi-step moderation system. So, and you can just, if you don't want to have any moderation and you just want to see all questions that come in, you can just use incoming. If you want to have, maybe you want to have, you're going to be on stage and you want a team member to go through and, filter questions that, with some criteria that you want to answer, then you could potentially do that. Have a team member just drag. So if this question right here, Stephanie's question, if it was on incoming, they would literally just drag it over to approved, and now it rests inside the approval process. The reason we have a two-step moderation that you can use, you don't have to, but you can, is it allows for one team member to kind of narrow down the questions, and then perhaps another one to say, okay, of these narrowed down questions, we're going to have you answer just these 3. Now, where does this come in, right? Like if this is just 3 columns, why is this important? So inside of the 3 dots under each of the columns, you have 2 different views. And the one that we use quite a bit is called stage view. And if I click on that, you'll see what stage view looks like. It is essentially a black screen that is pretty simple. It gives you the name of the person who asked the question, the time that they submitted the question, and the question itself. It then gives you, as the user, 2 options, 2 management options. You can trash the question, like, no, I don't want to answer that question, or check mark the question and say, yes, I've answered that question. So the way I use this is, yesterday we had a Q&A call for Leap. Well, on an iPad in front of me, I had the black screen open, and I was able to read the questions on the iPad as they were approved by a team member, right? So we had a 1-step moderation in place yesterday. So our Leap team was approving questions as they came in. They were showing up on my iPad. As I answered them, I clicked the check mark and they went away. So yeah, that's how the Q&A system works in its entirety. I think it's pretty cool. We've been using it quite a lot, to be honest with you. We were using Slido for the longest time. I think Slido has some more robust features, but it's also another service you have to pay for. And, Barry and I were talking about this yesterday. One of the things that Slido had was the ability to make questions a little more transparent to the audience and allow the audience to actually vote questions up. And while I think it's a cool feature, most people never did it, right? Most people just submitted their own question, didn't actually vote up other people's questions. So while I really appreciated it, the reality is, out of, thousands of questions that Barry and I have answered via Slido, if I were to tell you that only 5% of them were ever voted on, it's probably high. So we don't have the vote feature just yet. We've talked about it, but we haven't gotten there yet. Anyway,
It scales really well. That's the thing with that. When you have a really large audience and you only have a finite amount of time for questions, that teaches people to go and vote. It's like, if I'm going to sit through a half an hour of questions, I might as well be listening to answers that I want to know. And so out of the 100 questions that have been posted, I'm going to choose the ones that I like. So you teach your audience what to do, but with a smaller group, it doesn't. I agree. It doesn't very often happen because it would tend to get through all the questions.
Yeah. I'm going to say something that people may not appreciate, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think generally speaking, individuals are super smart. And generally speaking, large groups are not. And I, generally speaking, would rather answer the questions I want to answer that I think will apply to most people than the questions that the vocal minority of people who have voted on a couple of questions are saying these are the questions that are important. I just think as a content creator and as, let's just say, I'm going to use this term exceptionally loosely, as an educator of my content, right? I probably know what questions are going to be most useful to the audience far more than the audience does.
So I agree with you. I would push back on that though and say, then why do you take voice questions? Because you have no control over what people are going to ask.
I think that sometimes that, for me, that goes to interaction and engagement, right?
More so.
The reason I take voice questions rather than, and that you're not wrong. I actually prefer to take voice questions than text-based questions. We do text-based questions in certain situations where I know I have to answer a lot of questions quickly, right? So on the leap call, we rarely unmute people to allow them to ask questions. They submit the questions and we go through them. And the reason we do that is because we do that more because people generally take a long time to ask a question, right? Yeah. So a simple question that would take me 10 seconds to read may take you, or may take someone, 60 seconds to ask. And when I only have 2 hours to answer as many questions as possible, we need to be effective with our time. So that's actually less, there's very little moderation that happens on the leap call anyway. And at our live events, I like taking live questions because I rather hear and engage and interact with people. And I do also agree with you. There's another downside to that, Grant, which we talk about, and a mutual friend of ours talks about all the time, which is that most presenters are horrible at answering questions effectively, right? And at controlling the audience through questions, right? Yeah. Have you ever been at a live event and somebody takes the mic and is asking a question and it's like a runaway question, and before you know it, that person has spoken for like 3 minutes and you're like, why did they not stop them? Why did they not just simply say, what's your question? Right? Like, that's all you have to do.
Question.
Right. Yeah. What's your question?
Yeah. I think to further support your argument, that it depends a lot on the content type, and the more technical your content is, I think the more effective text questions can be.
Totally.
Because what is 2 + 2? We're going to have the answer of 4, and that's going to be really an effective answer. But I think with TVE, very often both you and Barry are using those questions as an opportunity to coach and to dive into the nuance of what is the bigger question.
Yeah.
Like
Or,
what
or float
we're
down a
doing here.
different topic entirely. Like it's not uncommon to get a question and I mean, yes, we'll answer the question, but the answer to the question actually answers another question entirely that the person didn't even ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think there's a place for both of these systems.
Yeah. And I think, this is one of those things that, I mean, we've, veered far off, far off the the purpose of this call, which is to answer questions about Obvio. But this is one of those skills that is it's a learned skill as an event host. The ability to answer questions live is a learned skill, and it's a skill that we should all master as event hosts.
Yeah.
So I think it's super important. We have a client that I joke behind his back about, and it's probably not somebody you know, just for the record. So that eliminates a few people who you may think it is.
What's his name? What's his name?
What's his name? Yeah. There you go. That eliminates a bunch of other people you may think it is. So he gets on stage for an hour long open Q&A session, at the beginning of the day. And we all think to ourselves, okay, how many questions is he going to get through today? And usually there's an over under and, one of us will set it. Generally speaking, he takes 20 minutes to answer a question. It's the it's the most asinine thing. we're at the point now where we're like, do we need to do questions? He doesn't really actually answer any questions. Should we bother with that? Why don't we call it something else? Why don't we call it, story time?
Fireside chat.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. All right. So on to the next question, Heather, before we run out of time on that one.
So the next one is from Stephanie. I think this might have been a follow-up from earlier, but why is Vimeo or Wistia better?
Vimeo Wistia more specifically, I think has slightly better security. The ability to be slightly more secure than YouTube. And YouTube also can be a distraction. So one of the reasons that I don't use Vimeo all that often, to be honest with you. And I used Vimeo a lot many years ago, and I just haven't used it very much recently. So Vimeo may also fall into the same bucket.
I can talk to that. So you talk about Wistia and I can talk about Vimeo.
So I like Wistia because you can customize the player really, really easily. I like Wistia because there's ways to put some CTAs or calls to action inside of it. I like Wistia because if the user does happen to figure out how to click on a link to get to just a Wistia page to see the video, there's no distractions on that page. It's just the video. In all those cases, when you compare it to YouTube, when you embed a YouTube video, even if it's unlisted, the user can always just click on the YouTube logo, wind up on YouTube, right? And now all of a sudden, before you know it, they're watching cat videos. So there's just too many, in my opinion, there's too many distractions with using YouTube as your delivery mechanism. But with that being said, you can use it and it's free. So it's a great place to start. I just don't think it's a great place to finish.
So all of those features are also available on Vimeo now. And so it's just, there's different pricing. I think I've used both of the different systems and I've just landed on Vimeo for some time because I've got 6 terabytes of videos on there at the moment. And so it's just the ability to be able to customize the player. You can also lock down where that video can be embedded, where it can be played. So it can't be played on Vimeo, on the vimeo.com domain. It doesn't show up there at all. And then you can say, I only want it to play on this on this Obvio domain so that people can't take it and embed it on another website or things like that. So the thing always with this is, like with all security, when you're thinking about security, there's ease of access and there's security. So it's almost like, how do you get people to be able to see the video, and then how do you protect the video in a way? But security is always a trade-off of convenience. And often with what we're wanting is to get people access as easily as possible. And so I have found with quite a few Obvio events that I can take a Vimeo video and embed it on my Obvio dashboard, and it's awesome. People use the same link they use for the event. They come back and there it is, and they don't need to bounce off anywhere else, and they hit play and away it goes. They can keep coming back to that. So it's just a couple of those. Vimeo also, you can do some live streaming and things with it as well, which can be helpful. So, but yeah, I agree, Heather, that Wistia and Vimeo are pretty similar, but their pricing is different. Wistia, I have found that they have some better sort of playlist management and things like that. There's some cool things there that they do. But we can embed any video. You can take any video and embed it in a dashboard if you want to. Cool. What's next, Heather?
So this one's from Mary. She said she tried setting up automatically turning on and off buttons on her dashboard, but it didn't work. So I deleted the rule. Can you show me the right way to do it, or refer me to a link to a recording? Also, can you create rules to turn the buttons on and off at different times each week, not recurring?
All right, so a couple of things around that question. Let's start by talking about, it sounds like you're talking about time-based rules. So let's just go with that as the assumption. So I'm going to create a new button here, and I'm going to go to rules, and you have show from and you have show until. Show from is when you want to show the button from, so starting. So let's say I wanted to show a button tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Then I would do that. And let's say I wanted the button to hide tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So then I would do that. So now this button, if I click save, this button right here called button will show tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and it will hide at 10 a.m. Now, how you can know if that is actually accurate, you can go into preview. And if you just preview it, you'll see that there are no buttons. But if you go into preview, there's some rules that you can set. So I'm going to set my date to be tomorrow at 9:15 a.m. and I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click save. Now, when I do, I'm looking at this dashboard as though it's 9:15 a.m. tomorrow morning. And you can see that the button is now there. Now, if I go back into my rules and say, well, what if I change it to be 10 a.m.? And if I did my job right, then the button will disappear. Okay, so that's how you set up your show from and show until rules. And that applies not just to buttons, but to just about anything. So anything that has a rule can do that. If you go into agendas, if you want to set up an agenda that only shows for one day. So as an example, sometimes we've had clients where they have each like they have a detailed agenda for each day, but they don't publish the agenda until the beginning of the day. So you can go in and create a detailed agenda and say, okay, I want this agenda because it's for May 9th to show it starting at 5:55 a.m. And then on May 9th at 11:59 p.m., I want it to go away. And then you click save, and now this agenda will show and delete, or show and hide based on those rules, and everything in that agenda will do that same thing. Resources, you have the same thing you can do with. Individual resources, you also have the same thing you can do with. Buttons in the sidebar, you can do that with. You can do that with blog posts. Blog posts, the show from date is actually the published date. So if you go to rules, you'll see that the show from date is not something that you can change. That's because it's the published date. So they're the same thing essentially. But you can also then have a blog post disappear at a certain time, right? So you can add show from and show until dates to pretty much anything that you can have a rule associated with on the dashboard. Something to be aware of, there is no way currently to have a recurring button that shows and hides at a specific time each day, or to have a button that has multiple rules, meaning it shows up, tomorrow morning between 8 and 10, and then the following day it shows up again between 12 and 2, and then the day after that it shows up again between 4 and 8. In order to do that, in order to have the same button show up 3 different times at different time frames, you actually have to create 3 different buttons and apply the from until rules to each of those buttons respectively. So hopefully that helped. Cool.
I would just add quickly, because often there's philosophy behind some of this stuff, and I just think be careful with how much you lock your event down to time, and so it's great to automate, but one of the big advantages of online events is that you're not restricted by time and space. And so by putting boundaries in, and a really good use case for these times show from is day 2. You want a welcome message for day 2 and you want it to come on at 5 a.m. or whatever it is. That's a great use case because that's not restricting you in any way. But if you had a pitch or an offer option that appears at a particular time, you don't want that to appear before you've actually pitched it. And if you're looking at that countdown timer that you're thinking, I've got to do this before that appears on the dashboard and that people see it, I would argue that you don't want to restrict yourself like that, and that's a simple task for a team member when you have a button or a blog post or whatever, and you just use the enable disable toggle, and you line up your team member and you say, as soon as I've shown the slide that has the price, then go and enable the button on the dashboard. That's an example, I think. And now you've taken the pressure off, and now you can flow with things and work with your event and not be bound to the clock. It's just a comment on that.
Cool. Yeah, it's actually something that Grant and I adding times to Obvio was something that we actually resisted heavily for a good long time. And finally we had a client who paid us enough to get rid of that resistance.
We will never do that. And then, sorry, how much? Okay, yeah, we can.
Yeah,
we can do that.
We can do that.
Yeah,
Listen,
sure.
everything has a price. And what's really funny is, so I think you guys know Sage is generally Obvio's largest client. Like we use, I'm in Obvio every single day making changes to a dashboard for an event that's happening that week or the following week or whatever. And I almost never use it. Like it's really, really, really rare. We just had an event this past weekend. It was probably the first time that I actually set up timing for items. But how I did it, to Grant's point, is I did it with Windows, right? So if I knew that something was going to need to be based on the time frame that the host said that the event was going to happen at, if they said something needed to be, was going to be done at 2:00, I would make it visible at 1:45. And generally made things visible earlier than was required, so that if something happened early, which is almost never happens with a live event. Usually it's late. Then it didn't matter. And then we also, there were a couple of things that we didn't want to see until a specific time or until a specific thing was said. In those cases, we didn't apply times. In those cases, we actually manually enabled or disabled the buttons. Any other questions, Heather?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you're done talking. Sorry.
You're good.
So TJ posted this. I'm not sure if this has to do with Obvio, TJ, but he said he lost his primary Facebook account last week trying to use an app that Blue mentioned to schedule multiple posts and got hacked via Instagram. I had to create a new Facebook account, but really need my
It feels like there's some blame in there somewhere in that question.
do you know how he can get his Facebook account back?
I don't. I saw the one part of that question because I was reading it, and yes, you're right. Facebook is useless. So no, I don't have any advice on that.
I have a follow-up question. What was the app that you suggested?
I have no idea.
Okay. Next one, Muddy. I heard there's exciting new feature coming to Obvio in the not too distant future called Obi or Obby. Is it like Obi-Wan Kenobi or like Obby? I don't
It
know.
would be it's Obi,
Okay.
and it's actually not technically coming to Obvio. It's coming to Leap, so it's probably not a conversation for this meeting.
Great. Sorry, Muddy. Next one, Sarah, do you recommend a welcome message, a different one for each day?
We have a client. I think the best use of a welcome message is this. We have a client who pre-records a daily, like kind of inspirational video that we show at the beginning or that we make live at the beginning of each day. And I think that's a neat use of the welcome message. I think adding more text for people to read is something that most people probably won't read. So while I like it as a theory, I don't know that it's a significantly useful use of time. But I do like the idea of putting a video on each day.
Okay. Next question's from Mary. Can we rename recordings inside of Obvio?
No. There's very little control that you have over recordings that any of us actually have over recordings inside of Obvio. And here's the reason why. The recordings don't actually live in Obvio. The recordings live on Zoom. And what we're doing is we're providing you with a link to the recordings that live on Zoom. That's as simple as it is, right? Obvio is not actually making the recording, Zoom is. The link that you see, even though you see it inside the Obvio interface, is a link back to Zoom. If you click the little down arrow and you see all the different things that you can download, like the chat or the transcript or the gallery view or the speaker view, any of those things are all the recordings that you would get if you did have access to the Zoom account that we have, right? So all of that stuff is just links to Zoom, and as a result of that, there's not much flexibility in terms of what you name it, which would probably be another argument for downloading the video, renaming it to be whatever you want, and uploading it to the service that you want to use to distribute it.
Yeah, I get the desire to do it, but I think that there is to think of it as a temporary bucket of those recordings, and not sort of your filing system or organization system, for it. And so, ideally, people are, from the moment that it's available, sort of the next day or something, just going and getting it, and then putting that into your long-term, archive system and thinking of it in a different way. And so it's just a way to access it. But I do get some of the things that we are hearing more and more is how people are using Obvio for meetings. And when you're doing lots and lots of meetings, then those recordings, that recordings list gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it can be a little cumbersome to navigate. So there's something there for us to think about. I think. So, but it's not having a place to store recordings and organize them. So, but there is still something there that at least I'm thinking about. There's some
Yeah,
work
I
we
think
could
one
do.
of the reasons why, and listen, this could be kind of like the "you'll never see us put a timer on a button" comment, right? But one of the main reasons for me that I don't think this is a terribly useful thing to focus on is most people start Zoom before they would want their recording to start. And Zoom starts recording the moment you start the meeting, right? So in order to get, and let's say you go into Zoom a half an hour before your event is going to start, because you want to go in and you want to just make sure everything is working, and you double check your video and you make sure that all your settings are right. And then you just mute yourself and walk away. Well, now there's a recording of the first 30 minutes of that before your attendees started to get in. And now you walk up to your camera, you unmute yourself, you welcome people. Well, the recording, that's not something that you wouldn't publish it like that. Most people wouldn't. I mean, some people may, but most people wouldn't publish the recording like that. Most people would want to remove that 30 minutes from the recording. Now, admittedly, you can go into Zoom and you can stop the recording and you can restart it. But I will tell you, more recordings have been lost that way than any other way in the history of Obvio, right? Almost every single request that we get for a missing recording has a recording of some sort in existence. It just doesn't have all of it. And what happened is the user stopped the recording and forgot to restart it. And once you stop the recording, there's no getting it back. Like it's not like it's hidden somewhere and we just can't get access to it, right? It's just not there. So we oftentimes on these calls will urge you to not ever stop recordings in Zoom. Like, don't use Zoom as your editor, because it will invariably have something happen where you pause the recording because you went on a break and then your phone rang and then you had to take the dog out and then you needed to grab a glass of water and then you came back and you unmuted because now you're 5 minutes late getting back to your attendees, and you just start talking. And what do you forget to do? Press record. And now your recording is gone. And especially if it's your only recording, don't ever stop the recording in Zoom. Just don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. Which then means that the recordings in Zoom are almost never just ready for prime time. They almost always need some sort of, I'm not going to call it editing because it's not really editing. They just need to be trimmed, right? They just are, top and tailed. They need to have the front cut and the back cut, so that you can take this one big long recording and turn it into 4 90-minute recordings, right? Where now it's something that is deliverable. So anyway, that's probably a little bit too soapboxy, but it is what it is. There's very few questions left, and there's 50 minutes.
We
Still in
we
time
get
here, people.
we get tickets and requests about recordings pretty much every week, and so it is a big topic. The thing that I think about too, like it's standard for me to start a meeting 2 hours before the event starts, and and so one of the things that we do is we never stop the recordings, and we also don't speak in that room anything that we wouldn't want anyone else to hear. It's just good practice. And so we even have a separate comm system where we can keep the Zoom meeting muted, and if we need to talk about other things, we do that in a separate system. And so that never never could there be a time where you're hearing you saying something about your client or something like that just happened to appear you know, because just that recording doesn't exist. And so, and that way, you've got the best of both worlds. You've always got the recording there. So it's all these things you learn the hard way.
Okay. So Anrik had a follow-up question from last week. He wants to know if there's any updates about the phone numbers not populating or the Zoom background button not working.
The Zoom background button, I think, is resolved. I actually think both of those things were fixed. But the way you ask the question makes me think that maybe it's not.
Not necessarily, because I just haven't had any feedback on that. And my emails are a little bit like yours. There's like 250,000 unread items. So it could have been that the team got back to me and I haven't seen it, but I was just on here, so I thought I'd ask.
Well, I will say this. Our team would not have gotten back to you because it would have been me. So I know I didn't do that. But
Okay.
I do. I'm trying to think of where I have a link. The panels, sorry, the Zoom backgrounds link was an easy fix, and I'm pretty sure that was implemented almost right away. And I feel moderately confident that the phone number thing is also fixed.
All right, I'll test it tonight.
Yeah, please do let us know if it's still a problem, because I do believe that was resolved. There was also a a couple of go high level things that were resolved. One that was capitalizations. So name first and last names are now capitalized. We are having to do it on our end because Go High Level, even though inside of your Go High Level interface you see capitalization, when the information comes across through the API with Go High Level, it's
all
not
lowercase.
Yeah, it's all lowercase. So we are just simply applying an uppercase to the first word in each of the first and last names. So it may not always be perfect.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we resolved with High Level was an oddball outlier, which was the tag that we create that we ask you to add to your attendees.
Your workflow.
Yeah, how we choose what that tag is has changed because we had an incident that Ken Sky described, and Anrik, you may have described this as well. And the result was attendees were disappearing from Obvio. Like all of a sudden, the attendee list was gone. What was actually taking place, from what we've found, at least in this particular case, is for some reason, Go High Level got disconnected from Obvio. And when you reconnect it, the tag that is created at the end of the tag has the date that the tag is being created, right? So if your original tag was created 2 days ago, and now you create a new and then Go High Level got disconnected and you reconnect it, there's a new tag that gets created for that particular connection. And if you don't apply that tag to all of your previous attendees almost right away, then all of those attendees will disappear within 5 minutes, because the next time Obvio and High Level sync, it says, hey, does anybody have this tag? And if not, we remove them. So that it was just a little bit funky. So we've changed the structure of the tag that we create so that if Go High Level gets disconnected and you have to reconnect it, the tag doesn't change, which will solve that problem.
Gotcha.
which is
Yeah, no,
probably way too much information for you, but whatever. It is
no.
what it is.
I had already identified that was an issue, but I had some trouble with Go High Level right in the beginning with that. I think Heather was involved with the tech team. It just wasn't syncing at all, even though everything was set up. And then the dev team had done something and flushed a cache or something like that. And then even though my new tags were correct, it still wiped everything out. But it was lucky it was early on. It was only 5 attendees at that point. So I just added them back manually. And since then, it's been working like a bomb. So
Sweet.
All right, man.
So yeah, we made a few changes in the last week to just try and get rid of a couple of bugs there. And that was one of them. Another thing that we did it's minor, but I think useful, is when you go to, if you click out of a config, like of a config panel where you're making changes without clicking save, you get this confirmation dialog box that we implemented last year that says, are you sure you want to leave, or do you want to save your changes or discard your changes? And there was something that was just missing from that. And for the most part, that didn't matter. There are certain cases where it did matter, which is broadcasts are an example of it mattering. So there's now on that confirmation dialog box, there's a little X in the top right-hand corner, and that little X acts as a cancel. So if you click, when you get that confirmation dialog box, rather than just clicking save or discard, you now have the ability to cancel the closure of the configuration window, which is really, it's probably most handy on broadcasts. Like if you're halfway through a broadcast and you're not ready to save it yet, it's super handy.
Awesome sauce.
And then there were a few other minor bug fixes that got saved with broadcasts as well, that were manifesting in weird ways. And then there's one that we're fixing right now. There's a few things with broadcasts that were just behaving interestingly, I'll just say. And they should all be fixed in the next 24 hours or so.
Great stuff.
Yep.
Old MacDonald is not very happy about the title case of the last name. Every time McDonald comes up, he's like, the D should also be a capital. What happened? That's how I entered it.
All right, next question.
Robin said, I was in a Zoom where they used the Zoom poll feature to push people into breakout rooms based on their answers. Can we integrate this somehow to automatically assign them a breakout room in Obvio?
No.
The thing you can do, there's two things I think that can be helpful with this. One is that you can you can always open breakout rooms
manually
and allow people to choose. That can be really powerful, right? So you set up breakout rooms and you have 5 different options. Now you can choose and go into those, and that could be somewhat related to a poll that you did. That they've thought about it. Okay, now we've got 5 breakout rooms with those answers. You could choose that. The second thing, although there's nothing stopping you from doing what you said, what can happen within Zoom, but tying that to data within Obvio is not currently available. What you can do is use labels and label people within Zoom with a particular group, and so I've done that before. There's an event that we do over 3 days that has small group assignments, and we use breakout rooms to put them into their small groups. And so on our first day, we establish what those small groups are. We then update all of our attendee data in Obvio. And now we put a small group number as a group in Obvio, and then we append that using labels. We append that to the end of their name in Zoom. The next time they come back in, they've now got a number at the end of their name, and that makes it super easy to assign them to the breakout rooms. It's still a manual process, but if I'm wanting to create the breakout room for group 7, in the breakout room assignment panel, I can search for 7, and now all the people that are that have that in their name appear, and I assign, and I'm done. And so that's a that's a halfway step, at least to that. It would be great to be able to use data and to assign them. And we're playing around with some things, but it's clunky at the moment. And so we'll see where that goes.
They used it like in the middle of the presentation for the subject we were talking about, because there wasn't that many. But could we do it like in theory with the poll that now is available in Obvio to run through forms, and then somehow set it up ahead of time, like based on these answers, they'll go into these breakout rooms? Like, can we do like pre-work to make it easier?
You do. You can do the polling within the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Sorry, you can totally do. You can totally do what you just said, all within the Zoom meeting, and it actually does save to the meeting. And so you can set up a poll a day before. You can go into the meeting, set up the poll. Here you go. He's playing.
Yeah.
Right, and then once that poll has happened, you can then use the polling data to create breakout rooms. You can do exactly what you're saying. It's just and maybe I was reading into your question more than necessary, but that was there is no connection between Obvio data and that process.
Yeah,
but
I actually think I may have answered your question, Robin, a little bit too quickly. I actually think you can do exactly what you asked.
So, because this is a Zoom poll, right? That
this is a Zoom poll. Would you guys all just answer the question, please? Come on, as many of you as possible. Only 2 of 20, 10% participation. There we go. You don't all have to say blue. It's fine. I'm not going to be offended. Keep going. Come on, keep going.
I had already answered that, blue.
Yeah, well, I know yours is definitely. I know yours is red for sure.
No, I'm saying I already answered Robin's question that you can totally assign them. Yes, based on poll results.
Yeah, I didn't
from
realize
the
you could
Zoom
do
poll?
that. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, but it's all within the meeting, and no Obvio data can be used. There's nothing that's tying that together.
Cool.
Where do you do the poll? Where do you do the breakouts from poll? I don't see that. I know the option is turned on because I just went and looked.
So do you have to turn the option on in Zoom or in Obvio?
No, the at the account. First off, while Grant was talking and I wasn't listening, I found the support document that talks about how to create breakouts from poll results. And I just started with the prerequisites. So everything that you need in order to do it is actually already turned on.
Muddy, do you have the answer?
It's when you create the poll question. At the bottom, there's a little check mark that says set up breakout rooms based on response.
Fascinating. Can we create polls from, I forget how this works. Plus
we messed around with this, but yeah, I mean, you can create polls.
Yeah, so when you click the plus,
this gets really funky with hosts and co-hosts and things like that. And it's gotten a little bit better, but it still is a little funny with who has control over how to do the polls.
Yeah, I can't seem to create a poll right now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm the host and I can't either. But in theory, and you know, Robin, this is an example of where a lot of our experience with Obvio and Zoom is multi-room events. And so what happens then is that we are not, we've sort of bypassed some of these options that are really specific to one meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And we think about, which is why we have essentially polling, which is the forms feature in Obvio. As one of the reasons we have that is because we have multi-room events and we want all that data in one place, not scattered across multiple meetings. And so it's just an example of where we haven't played around with it too much because
Clearly.
we're doing larger events. What's that?
Clearly. As we mess with this right now in the moment.
I'm not to the big number of events yet. And I saw this utilized in another meeting and I was like, wow, that it was like so efficient with what they were talking about, like who's doing this. And then they threw us in a room to chat about it. So it was cool.
Yeah, I've had great success with allowing people to choose breakout rooms. It's kind of the same thing. It's just that the poll is asking the question, and then you're assigning people into it. But you can totally create breakout rooms and have different colors, and people just choose it. The advantage with that is that they can move rooms. You know, like if you allow it, they can choose a room, then they can go to a different one if they chose wrong. You know, things like that. So there's a lot of power in those, and I use that a lot for what I call parking lot talk at the end of events, as like a mingling or networking opportunity with people that just want to be able to hang out and talk at the end of an event. Can work really, really well. You just create 5 or 10 rooms and with different topics. People can suggest different topics, and then they just jump into those, and they hang out for a while. You just have someone who monitors, who's just hanging around as the host, just in case. It's really cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Something else, Heather?
Yeah. Mary said, I'm not able to select the record on my computer option anymore. Has this been disabled or is it just my account?
The record on computer option has never actually been something that's enabled in Obvio Zoom meetings, and it has to do with the fact that we're recording in the cloud.
Great. And then Amy, oh, she said she used to be able to do it in the chat.
When you say used to be able to do it, like a week ago, or used to be able to do it a month ago? I will say this. I actually was I was working on something about a week ago, and I had turned it on briefly, but then turned it back off because what I was trying to do I couldn't actually do. So it is currently off. This is one of those things that one of the things that we have on our wish list of things to work on this year is the ability to give users a little bit more flexibility in terms of Zoom options inside of Obvio. And that would be one of them that is on our list of things to allow users to enable. Here's the reason why it's disabled, just so you have some context. Because Mary, am I remembering correctly that you work with the Robbins group as a crew member? Yeah. So here's the reason why it's currently disabled. As co-hosts, when you're a co-host, you can start and stop recordings. And most of our clients don't necessarily want their team members to be able to have access to recordings. But at the same time, most of our clients have their team members go in to events as co-hosts. So by only allowing recording in the cloud, it prevents team members from unintentionally, let's just say, unintentionally recording an event locally to their computer. And that's the primary reason for it. So that's the primary reason why it's disabled.
Okay, the next one was from Amy. She wanted to know if they resolved the broadcast issue where you couldn't edit a broadcast or save it.
So yes, I know that one of the things that we've been working on is some funkiness with the editor of broadcasts. So one of the things that we found recently, yeah, just refresh. Unfortunately, that's accurate. But one of the things that we found recently is once you save a broadcast, you can then not edit or create a new broadcast unless you refresh the page, which, Muddy is, joking, but being serious as well.
I'm serious.
Yeah. So that is actually it's actually being worked on. It was being worked on a couple days ago. And I think the fix is on our staging system, which we're testing. So that's one of the problems that we had. Another problem that we had is if the subject line wasn't filled in, it was providing a really weird error. Rather than just saying the subject line needs to be filled, it was providing an error that said something like network error. So that's another thing that we've been working on solving. So those are two bugs that we're working on inside of the broadcast editor. A couple of other things that we're working on inside the broadcast editor is I don't remember.
Smells good.
Yeah, this one may be Janae.
Basil?
But when you insert a variable, the text that you insert wasn't able to be formatted. You had to manually type the variable in order to actually be able to format it. So we're working on resolving that as well. So those were all broadcast related issues, although that variable issue appears elsewhere as well. But those are all bugs that some of them are actually already solved. But I don't think the broadcast ones are on production just yet, but they're close.
It would be nice if I had a little pop-up that said refresh your screen because you can't.
If we could give you a pop-up that said refresh your screen, we could just as easily actually fix the problem.
I know.
So rather than provide you with a pop-up that says refresh your screen, we're working on solving the problem because that feels like a better way to go.
Well, it's nice to know there is a way to work around it because I'd make a broadcast and then all I could do is duplicate it. I couldn't even turn it on.
Yeah, so it is unfortunately accurate that if all you need to do to solve that yourself is refresh the page.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden you'll be able to edit and create new broadcasts. But only one, and then you'll have to edit, and then you'll have to refresh the page again. But that'll be solved this week.
All right, thank you.
You are welcome.
We are all out of questions.
Yeah, and actually, as you said that, I'm going back to I'm looking to see if add broadcast disabled after save. Okay, so apparently that issue is on production. I haven't tested it to see if they fixed the right problem. Which I shouldn't laugh at, but
as opposed to the wrong problem.
Yeah, it's a real thing, unfortunately. All right, let's see. Edit. and change that and click save and then edit and change that and click save. Yeah, it's actually fixed on production. You no longer have to edit the. I can even prove it because sometimes
We
it's
do.
more. Sometimes that's more believable.
We do this intentionally sometimes because then it makes you appreciate that it works now. It's like, yes,
exactly.
King.
So if I wanted to remove the D's from that subject line and click save and then edit, and maybe I wanted to add things and click save.
What?
And then I know, then do this.
Now works as it should.
Another, I know, right? It's like, this is what it should have done right from the beginning, but who's counting? Yeah, it's working as it should. That's lovely. What I don't know.
You can show that X there now too, right? I was just on the discard.
Yeah. This problem is not solved yet. The insert this as text from the variables menu that is not solved yet. Okay, so if I click out, so this little X is the new minor update to the save updates dialog. So rather than just save and discard, the third one is the ability just to cancel by clicking the X, and it just takes you right back and doesn't close the dialog. So there you go. A few little changes, including no longer needing to refresh a page. Sometimes you just have to smile and be like, yeah, sorry.
It's a beast.
There's a lot to it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot to it. All right. Heather, any other questions before we wrap for the day? Because it feels like we're going to wrap a few minutes early because folks are done with their questions.
Winding up.
No more questions have come through. So
Jane doesn't want to use the question submitter. She just wants to ask a question. Do you want to let her unmute? This is risky. This is what we were talking about earlier. Are we just, you're waving goodbye? She's like, peace out.
Oh.
I'm out. Nice to see y'all. All right. Good call. That's fine. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Yeah. I would just say, looking forward to seeing you next week. We have quite a few more bug fixes that are working their way through the pipeline, as well as a couple of new features that we're working on as well. And yes, Marketplace is one of them. We are still working on it. It's coming.
I was just going to ask that.
It's coming. It is coming. Marketplace is coming. It's not there yet, but it is coming. So, all right, guys. Grant, good to see you.
Yes. You too.
Is this your office? Just without the good camera? Where are you?
Yeah. That's why it was partly why I was late. I was trying to throw a bunch of things. I've been away and I came back and I was like, oh, I'll just throw it all together. And I couldn't throw it all together. So I gave up and just put my computer on my standing desk and I sat down at the standing desk. Because at least then the camera's at the right height.
Have you seen my new TV? I put a new TV behind me.
Yeah, I saw that. I did note that.
Yeah, I got one of the silly frames, so I can actually put like a little photo back there. Goofy thing.
Blue loves when he can justify a work expense where it's just like.
Yeah, when I can justify a 75-inch television, and I'm all in. Yeah. Did I tell you that I found it? It was an open box at Best Buy. So it's a $3,000 television. I got it for $1,200.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and how inconvenient that it was an open box.
Well, actually, it was better than that. It was a no box. It wasn't an open box.
Oh,
When I
right.
got it, it was like wrapped in plastic. I'm like, okay, this was a floor model, which
No,
probably means it'll die much sooner than it would if it was brand new because it's been on for a year. But whatever.
it'll be fun.
I still
It'll be
saved
fun.
$1,800. All right, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Good to see ya.